Good morning, President's Day, but I'm still recording, and I've got a guest. Her name is Debbie Godfrey. I'm really excited about this conversation. It's a critically important topic, and I haven't done anything on this yet. But Debbie's the founder of a company called Positive Parenting. She started the company back in 1994, and she's a parent coach. She's also a victim of domestic violence. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But when we first talked a few months ago, she said, I'm a parenting coach for children and people that act like children. I got a kick out of that. So we're going to cover a number of different things in this conversation. I just want to take a minute and just introduce Debbie and say, hey, Debbie, thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Dave. I'm super excited to see where this is going to go. Yay.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I've got a terrible habit of getting every guest off track, and you're probably going to be the next victim. So terrible term. All right. So when we talk on the phone, one of the things I asked you a few months ago, is there anything in addition to the work you do that might be of interest? And I know you've talked about this before, but when we spoke, I didn't expect you to say it because I don't know you. But you had said, one of the things about me is that I was a victim of domestic violence as a younger person. You mom of three, and you grew up in a very normal, loving home. You're not the stereotypical person that would, that somebody might assume would end up in that situation. And I know you also mentioned that you were in and out of a women's shelter, I think 3 times in a year or something like that, you told me. Yep. So can you kind of frame that up? Maybe that's the baseline for the conversation, and talk about what that experience, how that unfolded and how it sparked your career.
Yeah, it's super crazy because 30 years ago plus, I guess at this point, I got married. I had 3 little kids, and my husband was abusive, and I was so young. I think I was 25 when I had my 3rd kid, and I really didn't. There wasn't as much awareness as there is now, and I actually had snuck out at one point and went to the college where I had taken college classes at community college, and one of the professors there said, I was sharing some of what was going on. He said, there's 800 numbers you can call. And he actually gave me that resource. And the next time something happened, I called. And at the same time, there was an article in the newspaper, and all these things just came together. And suddenly I was aware that this was happening to me. And the shelter was wonderful. They helped me get out and make a plan. It took me a little while to make a plan to go. And I went into shelter for a month the first time. And that's where I had my first parenting class. And it was super interesting because at the time I was normal, other than being in this domestic violence situation. But, I've got 3 kids and doing whatever I'm doing with them. And in the shelter, they said, you can't spank your kids in here. And I'm like, well, what? How? I mean, and I wasn't a huge spanker, but it was part of my discipline toolbox, right? And yeah, it's like you're in a violence shelter. Like,
right. Probably not a good idea. We're not going to be teaching that.
But it's what people don't realize. It is connected. No. And there's 59 countries in this world that have now outlawed spanking children, corporal punishment, because the research is there. There's a connection between that violence, even though I know here in America we don't consider it violence, and outcomes later on in life. And so anyway, so I had my first parenting class in there. The lady was wonderful. And I was just opening my eyes to all these new things. So when I got out, and this was the first of 3 visits, as you said, I got out and I actually organized my neighbors into a parenting breakfast club. And we hired Abby, who was one of the counselors in the shelter. And she came out every Saturday. We did a parenting breakfast club. We each chipped in $10 to pay Abby, and whoever's house it was at provided the coffee and donuts. And that's kind of where it started for me, organizing parenting. And then another visit to the shelter, and I took another parenting class. And then my last one was, I think, August of that year. So it was January, April, and August. Mm-hmm. And that 3rd one was the final one. And I was only in a couple of days, and it's like, okay, done with this. And, it just, they say it takes 3 to 7 times for a woman to leave a situation like that. And, it's economics, it's all kinds of things. But so I took another parenting class, and just super changed my life. I went from yelling at him all the time to feeling confident and competent, like, wow, I can do this and this is fun. And at one point, the April thing, he and I had tried to reconcile, and he was in the parenting class with me and he quit after the second session. And that's when I realized I can't parent with this guy. Like, I'm never going to be the parent I want to be. But that's what led me to the work. I mean, a year later, I had an opportunity to do some volunteer work. I was helping with the Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Child Abuse and Neglect organization. And they said, how would you like to teach parenting classes and we'll pay you? And I was like, okay. Sent me out in the community. And I really loved the work. And so I ended up getting a certification for a curriculum that I liked. And that's what I've done for my business. I started my business July of 1994. And yeah, that's what I've been doing ever since. And I love the work. So the way I see it is my biggest mistake in my life, which was marrying that guy, became my greatest gift in my life's work.
It sounds like it, and you can openly talk about it today. If you don't mind me, could I ask you a couple more questions about that?
Certainly.
Okay. So was there ever for anybody that may be in a similar situation?
Yeah, you should post the 800 number too.
Absolutely. I'll post whatever links and contact info that you have. I'm happy to share all of that. Was there ever a time prior to that first incident that you didn't feel right, where you felt, I think I'm in the wrong situation, prior to any violence? Was there anything that you thought or felt that you just ignored?
Well, like when we were getting married at my aunt's house and we were upstairs, I don't even remember this. And I was sober. I don't even remember this. My dad said, he said he had to make me go downstairs. Like I wasn't going to do it. So I was pregnant. It was, it was one of those things that I was just, the forces of the culture and community around me, it's like you have to do this kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, of course there were signs on our first date. Not even date. I met him at a bar and he put his hand on my rear and I thought that was cute. And when I was in counseling later for that, it's like, no, that's not really cute.
Right. And what you just kind of dismissed it as a normal act by him.
Right. Like, oh, he likes me. Like,
yeah. But he felt entitled. He felt entitled to put his hand on you. He doesn't even know who you are.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Right.
And then the first time something happened, you must have just been like, because you didn't grow up like that. Was it just like a dream almost?
I don't know that I would call it more of a nightmare.
Nightmare. It's shocking. It was the Twilight Zone, right? I mean, I would think.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, I had 3 little kids. Like I didn't know how to process it. And like you said, I was a biochem major. I left UCSB in the middle of my junior year to go marry him because, the child and stuff. And I was super smart, like intelligent wise. And yet this happened. And I think he was much more verbally violent and threatening. The actual incidents where he physically hurt me were few, but pretty significant. And, he'd hit me in the head or he kicked me in the crotch one time, things you can't see, but super demeaning and harmful to me. And the last one was actually after we had had a lot of fights and the neighbors would call 911 and all this crap. And he left a little tiny mark. And this was when we had actually separated and we were trying to exchange the kids. The judge did this crazy thing where the kids got the house and he and I had to go in and out of the house, which was awful. He was constantly trapping me inside. And so cops come, there's this little teeny tiny mark on me. But at that point it was post OJ. I always have a pre and post OJ thing. And they took it seriously. And that was what caused them to arrest him. Because what happens is women don't typically pursue prosecuting, right? And that the OJ thing and whatever the sister did took it out of the woman's hands and allowed police to do this when there was physical evidence. And so that was the last time. So I don't really remember, like, it just kind of creeps up on you, and you justify things. And like I said, most of it was like verbal and demeaning. And in the domestic violence, in the shelter, they give us a lot of training about this. And there's like this fog that comes over you. And it's that that experiment with the dogs where you leave them locked in a cage and then eventually open the door and they don't even know how to go out.
Mm.
And, that's where I was in that brain fog. And that's the beauty of the first month in the shelter, all of this fog lifting and, all of the counseling I got. And it was fabulous. And, I'll never forget the support and the love I had in there. And, I just, yeah.
It must make you a great teacher, coach, because you understand that, just giving a positive anecdotal piece of advice to a parent is not really the answer, because there's always something deeper underneath anything. It's the same thing with me and my clients. Whatever they want this person to get along with that person or whatever. Underneath it all, there's something else that isn't resolved. It's not as simple as, oh, just do this. And with I would think with an spousal abuse, the most ignorant response I would think that somebody could provide to somebody in your situation is, oh, just leave him, because it's not that simple. And to your point, the whole fog piece, is it does the fog set in because you start to feel like you just can't, because of financial, I can't pay to leave, or I'm afraid he'll kill me if I leave? What goes through the mind?
Well, all of that. And yeah, it's like, how can I ever do this? Like, I can't do, how am I going to, I've got 3 little kids. They were 6, 2, and 1 the first time I went in shelter. And how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to, the way the courts were then, and they're not much better now. Let me tell you, they tend to separate violence towards the woman from violence towards the kids. A lot of the research now show if it's violence towards women, it is violence towards the kids, whether or not he's actually hurting the kids. And so much now there's common couple violence too, where both people are nuts. Yeah. And and but the men are physically bigger and stronger. And so there's domestic terrorism, and then there's common couple violence. And so teasing that out, I think the courts have a really hard time with that. They like to kind of give the guy the benefit of the doubt, because the children definitely need both parents if that's possible. And so I don't know. It was a nutty time, and I think I was surviving, and I had a lot of good support, and I'm open to that. And I think that if nothing else, even right afterwards, doing things like this or doing newspaper articles, or I talked on domestic violence task force, is like, my story makes no sense to me, like being in this situation, unless I can help somebody else with it. So that's why I don't mind sharing it all, because otherwise, what in the world was the point of all that?
Right. Well, being able to talk about it is just, I almost think that's the medicine, is just being able to openly admit and talk. Right. It is what I didn't orchestrate this. It just happened. And if I don't talk about it, someone else is going to pay the price for it. So I think there's probably some moral obligation, I would think, inside of you to say, I've got to put this out there for those that won't say something. What's the impact? When I'm sure you coach and train parents that are experiencing this. What's the impact on a child? Are we likelier to train our children to do the same, or seek a relationship that's the same by staying in those situations?
Yes. And the kids they're going to learn what they see, not what we tell them. So we're modeling by example. So if there's a huge power differential between the couple, the kids will definitely pick up on that. How the couple negotiates conflict is huge. So many people say, well, we never fight in the front of the kids. I'm like, how are your kids going to learn conflict resolution? They need to see you resolve conflicts. If you do it badly, obviously, maybe don't do it so much in front of them, but figure out some not charged conflicts you can negotiate in front of them so that they can see and learn how to do that. That's exactly how they learn it. So if it's a abusive man and a woman, that the girls are going to learn to be victims and the boys are going to learn to be bullies. That's, there's definitely a gender role model there. And I've had same-sex couples take my classes, and I've worked with them, and it's masculine and feminine is really what it is. And it's not, I get those things all mixed up, but there's a masculine partner and a more feminine partner. And in those cases, the same dynamics are there, and the kids are going to learn the same thing. So yes, I think my work too, when I was doing some of my kind of deep personal growth, going through all of this, I did a lot of counseling and personal growth and all kinds of things, looking at how did I get in this situation and why. And there were things, I mean, yes, my parents were loving, and my dad was a military, you do what I say, I own you and everything you own until you're 18. And, there was just a lot of power and control over me, to where I didn't have the ability to make my own decisions. And then I, get tossed out when I'm 18, and I'm expected to like navigate life without having any tools.
Right.
And so, I mean, not that I'm blaming my parents in any way. It's just that was the order of my life. And so to encounter these kind of things, like I said, I kind of had it messed up. Like I didn't understand how things worked really. And so, yeah, I was not prepared. And I think that's the other thing I like to help parents with, is our job is to work ourselves out of a job. Like you want to be doing less and less, not more and more.
Yep. I feel that way about my job. I if I'm going to coach somebody for a period of time,
Yes.
I want to know that they're growing, and I'll still coach them as long as they're still growing. Makes my job interesting. But if we're coaching on the same thing, the same point for 3 months, 6 months, with 9, like there's nothing else to talk about, because now I'm always dealing with this one thing. And I believe the same thing. When we had kids, we have 3 kids as well. My whole goal, I want them to be confident, and I want them to be independent. And as smart as I think my wife and I are, it has not been an easy path. We've got good kids, but we've had some challenges, and challenges that I would have never thought we would have encountered. So it's humbling. It's such a humbling job. People, when you first have a kid, I remember one time I gave my parents a hard time. They gave me a hard time too, though. And getting hit was so normal. We got hit all the time. I remember my mom pounding the crap out of me in the supermarket or in a shoe store, and it didn't matter who was around. She just did that. And so we were used to that. As parents, we never did that. And so I just never wanted to embarrass my kids in that capacity. But I think that the culture has changed, where, 60s and 70s and even 80s, getting hit was more of a norm. It wasn't right, but it was more of a norm. And then today you just don't see that as much. So I don't know if you observe that.
You don't see it in public, and you don't see it proudly displayed. Well, in some places, and only some places. Most places are holding. 89% of parents still spank their toddlers. And I forget what the percentage is going up to teenagers. So it is very much still a tool that is used, and it is not that much less. It was 94% back when, and then it's crept down to from 94 to 89. So people are still smacking their kids. It's just not as and it's I want to say it's not as politically correct, but it is in many areas. And like I said, the US will, I feel like they're going to be the last kicking, screaming, dragging country to ban spanking. And it's going to happen because it's research based. The research is there. Thousands of studies that show negative outcomes when we use corporal punishment with children. And it's not just the corporal punishment, but it's the attitude of coercive parenting that does it.
How so? Talk about that.
Because when you're coercing your kids, and with the threat of violence, or the threat of I'm bigger and stronger and more powerful than you, therefore, that's creating a mindset that says I've got to be the bigger, more powerful, stronger one in order to XYZ.
Yep.
And so, or I'm the victim of that.
Right.
And so you're not training kids to be effective, just as exactly what my story was, and my parents too. My mom would swing her, she had a fist with a big rock on it that whack, would get us in the back of the car, and my dad with the belt and the spoons and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, violence was very much a part of love.
Yes.
If they love you, they're violent with you.
Yeah, I'm doing this because I love you. I'm doing this because
right. Yes.
So I'll use me as an example. I've never hit any of my kids, but there have been times where I lose my logic, and I'll say, I'm going to knock you out. I'm literally, but it's like I've completely been reduced to this mental midget that's making a false threat. And it's like, and at that point, I know I'm most powerless because I'm not going to do it. And they know I'm not going to do it. And, it's like, I've lost all my tools, my ability to, I've lost my logic or my objectivity. And, and it's such wasted words and a missed opportunity.
Well, it's that person that experienced getting knocked out, right? Or the threat becoming real when you were a kid. We revert to how our parents parented us in our moments of stress. Like that's where we go, is what we're familiar with. And so when we're in a moment of extreme stress, it's the instinct, and the instinct is what we grew up with.
Yeah.
And so to retrain that part of us that's part of my work, is helping parents with all the tools of how you can retrain where those buttons getting pushed in you are absolutely living in an experience that happened 20 or 30 years ago.
Absolutely.
So you can visit those, and you can reconnect the wiring in your brain that goes to, I'm going to knock you out. And it goes to, oh, like, sounds like we need to discuss something here.
Right. Exactly. And so let me ask you this: what is more well, I think I know the answer. You already said it. Corporal punishment is the most damaging, right, to a child.
It's the parent's attitude about it. So, I mean, when I took my training, I did a lot of different trainings I did the trainings with the Parenting and Love Logic guys, Klein and Fay, and I did positive discipline and, all these different things. And one thing I realized at some point was, I could spank my kids. Like literally, I could spank my kids and do it in a way that's not that harmful, like not harmful.
Right.
I mean, I could use it, but I realized just the very fact of my thought process that went into saying I could do this, I wouldn't, because it's such a mediocre parenting tool. Like
Right.
It's so basic that the results are messy. Like you're basically telling them their body's not theirs. There's no respect for them. And you have to use violence to get what you want, and coercion. And then you get told that you're loved. So it's tearing down the self-esteem and then building it back up. It's so messy, and we don't have to do that. There's so many better ways to field the conflict that comes up with our children.
It's so interesting you say that. We had many situations like that growing up where we would get hit. There were times where, remember my sister would have to stay home from school because she had welts all over her.
Oh.
And it was just crazy. And it was not unusual. And I don't say this with any, my mom passed away and she did the best she could. And, but she had her own host of problems. She did the best with the tools she had and her level of intellect and all that stuff. But the reality is it went from chaos and violence to tears and trying to put us back together. Right. And I just remember as a child just hoping like maybe today's the last time that's going to happen. I would feel sorry for my mother. I would feel sorry for her that we drove her to that point. And
and that's the mistake, is for a child to take on that belief that it's their fault in any way. And that's the kind of thing that gives us hangups when we get older.
Yeah. It's just interesting. Now tell me this on the how damaging is enabling a child, allowing, inappropriate behavior, tantrums, whatever they should or shouldn't be doing. There are a lot of parents that are so anti-discipline or tough love that they go the opposite way.
Yeah, it's super damaging. And I have a lot of exercises I do in my class with a concept we call kindness and firmness. You have to be both kind and firm when you're disciplining. And the problem is that some people don't get the idea of kids need limits and boundaries. Kids need consistency. Kids need to have a container to be able to grow and thrive. And when they don't have that, like you said, it's absolute chaos, and it's not good for them. And so I have parents that will say, well, my kid's hitting me. And it's like, okay, well, like, that's not going to hurt you. That's hurting them. Like, you can't let them hit you. It's like, that's hurting your child. It's bad for a child to get away with hitting a parent. That's not good for their own development. So you need to step up and figure out what's triggering this, when's it occurring, get vigilant, and don't allow that to happen.
Right.
I mean, you can use your physical size to deflect a hit from a small child. And I mean, I had one parent one time who had her cornea scratched by her kid because this was going on so much. And it was just ridiculous. It's just, you were the parent and you can do this without physical violence. Like their kids are not that hard to figure out once you understand how they operate.
Right. Well, I've seen parents over the years just get verbally abused by their kids and laugh it off and look at other parents. Say, what am I going to do? Like as if like, oh God, I mean, how do you handle this? As if it's beyond my control. It's beyond my ability to deal with it. And some of these kids might have been 10, 9 or 10 years old, and the parents just laugh it off. Like, and the kid might have called the mom a name or like a swear. And it's just like, oh, what am I going to do? And I think that always makes me feel really uneasy when I've seen that. It's not all the time, but I have seen it.
Yeah. And to me, it's like, it's better. I teach parents, like, again, this balance of kindness and firmness. And to me, it's always better to err a little bit on the side of firmness rather than kindness. And it's just for this point that we're making of, like, you don't want to be so firm. They're mixing up love and violence and all those kind of things. And that firmness, the children will perceive that as love. Whereas when you don't do anything, they don't think that they're loved. They actually perceive that as, I'm not loved. They don't love me enough to set the limits, to set the boundaries, to keep order or whatever it is. And so you're better off to err, being a little more strict than letting them get away with too much. And I mean, that's what I'm here to help. And I love helping parents in that situation. Like, they just need some tools to know what to do to not have those kids running the house, which is, again, it's bad for the kids. We're already grown, our personalities and our whatever is established. And those kids are still, their brains are still developing. Everything's still happening. So it's about them.
Right. And you're right. We are already grown, but there are a lot of parents who are physically grown, emotionally not at all. I mean, there's a very low barrier to entry to become a parent. I mean, we all know what it takes. So, but it's just crazy. You have to go through all of this process and testing to drive a car, or to carry a gun, or, well, maybe not carry a gun anymore. You probably get it, without it, but bad example. But to be a parent, there are no legal requirements. You can just become a parent no matter what your background or what your level of preparation or emotional maturity is. And it's scary to think. So when right now you coach and train parents all over the world, and you do most of it over Zoom because it's obviously the easiest way to connect with people today. How is this training and coaching introduced? Like, what are some of the key things that you might say to a parent that needs help, where they're like, oh, that's me? So that, because there's so many things that parents could use help with. How do you encapsulate it into a training so that they say that this is exactly what I want and need?
That's a hard question to answer. I mean, what do I teach? Is that?
Yeah. Like, so let me back up, because I have a habit of asking bad questions. So I do leadership training, for example. And, rather than go through every detail of the leadership training, I might say, I work with companies that want to build teams that can stand on their own. They don't want to make all the decisions. They don't want to be micromanaging people. They don't want to be firing people. I just want to hire people that can stand on their own and love being here. And so I might say that. Now, inside of it, we're going to talk about all sorts of things like, how do you set direction for a company? How do you build trust with people? How do you communicate with people? How do you hold them accountable? How do you set expectations? How do you coach them? Like, there's all sorts of things inside of it. But in the end, most of them is just like, most people would just say to me one-to-one, I just want them to come here and do the job and be nice. And, and that's really what they want. And so.
Okay. I think I see what you're saying. And you're helping me with my marketing too.
I'm sending you an invoice, by the way, Debbie. It's coming. No, only kidding. But do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, I think
for me, it's like for people that want their kids to listen to them. That's one of the parents' biggest complaint. It's like, my kids don't listen to me, or I have to tell them 20 times until they do something. It's like, yeah, because if you're telling them 20 times before you yell at them and then you make them do it, then they've learned that's how many times it takes. And so, I teach parents how to tell them one time and then follow through, so that you're not training your kids that they can keep pushing you that way.
Yeah.
And not yelling at them. So many parents don't want to yell at their kids, or don't like yelling at their kids, or spanking their kids, or whatever it is. That's a big draw. Like, how would it look if you weren't yelling at your kids anymore? How would you feel? Because that's parental self-esteem. There is feeling competent and confident in my parenting. I mean, some people come to me and they are such good parents, and all they needed was the confidence to know they're good parents. It's like, oh, you're doing a great job. Like,
Yep.
you don't need me.
Right.
They needed somebody to tell them that, right? And it's just, I don't know. It's all those things. Like, what is it about your parenting that has that little voice in the back of your head that says either this isn't going to turn out well, or especially teenage years, some parents look at their toddlers or their 5 or 6 year old and they start freaking out, like, oh my gosh, what is this kid going to be when they're a teenager? And it's best to intervene on those kind of things that you're seeing, because you're seeing the beginnings of something.
Right.
And, it's different for every kid, but, there's behaviors that you're training them. And the first 6 years are the most important. The first 2 years are the most important. So the first 2 years, 75% of all of our brain development happens. Yeah. So all those connections are happening in the first 2 years of life that need to happen for people to think properly.
Right.
And so if that's getting messed up from nutty parenting, you're already at a deficit. Now you go into 3, 4, 5, the manifestations of wiring that's messed up are starting to happen. Then you get a kid going into school. That's what we're seeing now. We're seeing so many kids in school where their wiring's not right. Yeah. And the teachers are trying to deal with this, and it's a nightmare. And you can still, everybody's kids are resilient. There's a lot of plasticity with brain and neuron connections, but there's also this thing of excising. I forget what it's called, but once your brain gets all the connections going, then it cuts out all the peripheral stuff. And so that keeps you from being able to make new connections. So the sooner you start doing something different with your children, the sooner they can create new neural pathways. And that's what we're after is, you can do this at any time. And so many of us don't do it till we're adults in therapy, but it's better to do it when they're kids and they still have a lot more plasticity and a lot more resilience to change. And that's the fun part for me. It's like showing parents a new way to do things and then coaching them like, okay, here you go. You're going to go do these new things with your kids. And then you got to give it time to roll through the process where they're going to test you and they're going to see if you're serious, and you've got to stay the course and, not give in.
Right. But let's go back to the parents themselves. Have you ever watched that show, The Dog Whisperer, with Cesar Millan?
I know of it.
All right. It's basically a guy who goes in and if you've got a dog that's out of control, he comes in and he gets the dog under control. But He does it not because the dog's broken. He basically goes in and says, it all comes back to the people. It all comes back to the owners and how they let that dog show up in the house. And so basically he retrains the people, and then they have a nice dog at the end. And
I think the Super Nanny show was similar to that was out 10 years ago,
Yeah, there you go. There's the people version of it, right? So you go in and you've got parents in a room who want to be better parents. They want to have whatever control, or they don't want to yell, or they want things to be peaceful or fun, or whatever. They want the family life to be fun and enjoyable and all that. How often, though, are you dealing with the unspoken? Like, at some point you had to admit you're in a domestic violence situation. How often is a parent just a couple, whether they're, no matter what kind of couple they are, they just shouldn't be together? We are not happy, and we're trying to figure out how to be better parents to these kids, but we're not admitting that maybe we don't want to be together. Maybe there was infidelity. Maybe there's a money issue. Maybe there's a job loss issue. Maybe there's a drug issue, an alcohol issue. But they want to say, I need to be a better parent over here, but they're not really dealing with what the core problem is.
Yeah, most of the time in those cases, they're actually trying to fix their kid. It's not even that they're trying to be a better parent. But if you're in a bad marriage, then your kids will be acting out. I can almost guarantee you.
Right.
And you're
Right.
going to be blaming the kids.
Right.
But it's the couple sets the tone for everything in the family. And so, you can have kids acting out and you think you don't know why, but if you look at your relationship, that's always the first place I go. If my kids are acting out, how is my relationship? Are we talking about things that we have unspoken things that we need to deal with, hidden agendas? Like all of that needs to be cleared for your kids to be okay. And so definitely that's like primary. And so, yes, I mean, there's times, well, for me, like the parenting thing and him quitting the parenting class that I was so passionate about after the second session and realizing, oh my gosh, I cannot be the parent I want to be with this person.
Right.
Like that was one of the most more motivating to me than even the abuse was that the vision I could already see of what I could do as a parent that I could not do in a dysfunctional situation like that. And so it is absolutely critical. And I'll get parents. I was just coaching yesterday, somebody, and she was in a relationship and it was just, they had separated because of the parenting issue. And now we were coaching and she realized during our coaching call, oh my gosh, this is the same issue. And when I let her back, we set the boundary. And now I realized the boundary was broken after like 2 weeks, regarding the child. And so, yeah, it was just like, I think that's the beauty of my class. I give people exercises and I show them like, don't do it this way, do it this way. I'll have people come up and you be the kid and I be the parent. And I mean, it's real practical and experiential. And inevitably after the very first session, there's 5 sessions, 5 3-hour sessions, whatever format I do. And after the first week, people come in to fix their kids. Like my kids aren't listening. My kids aren't doing this. My kids aren't doing that, whatever. We go through what I teach in the first session. They come back the next week and they're like, oh, this is about me. This isn't about my kids.
Right.
So I think that answers your question from before.
Yes.
It's the process of learning what makes kids operate the way they do and how we influence their personality development. What are the things in our parenting that influence their personality development? And that's when parents realize that I'm shaping this.
I can tell you, on a personal level, I found that parenting young children, all the way up until, middle school is when I start to see it, or I start to see all the, I don't like this. I don't like what my children are exposed to. And it's now I feel like I'm up against an environment and a culture that's changed drastically from what we were used to when we were kids, which is fine. The world evolves and people evolve. But the things that when I was a young child, in middle school, for example, we called it junior high back then, there was a small subset of troubled kids, and I didn't go to the bathroom. I literally would go to school, and it didn't matter how much water I drank, or I was going to hold off from going to the bathroom until I got home. And because I was afraid to go to certain bathrooms in school, because you didn't know if you were going to get out of the bathroom, and you didn't know if there was always something going on, cigarette smoking, pot smoking. And it's just the way it was. And you didn't know if there was going to be a fight in there. And so I just did, and I didn't grow up in a bad town, but that's just the way it was. But that was a small subset of kids though. And today I see just the norm is that. The norm is vaping, whether you play a sport or not. The norm is smoking weed. And that to me, and then you couple that with the pandemic. And I'm shocked at how becoming a parent or being a parent overnight has become a totally different job, where it feels at times that you're shoveling shit against the tide, and
the results of this aren't going to show up for 20 years of because you're right. And by 2040 or 50% of kids will be diagnosed with, somewhere on the spectrum.
Yes.
And there's reasons for this. Like we're not looking at the deeper, our food supply and our culture and everything else that's contributing to this stuff. And yeah, I mean, it is scary. It's funny. My daughter had a group of friends over. My daughter's 35 and she has my three grandkids, and I live in an apartment above them. So I'm very involved with, and she had a group of women friends over the other night, and they invited me, but I went and hung out for a little bit and then I left. But when I was there, they were talking about parenting and they were talking about stuff. And at one point, because the conversation was, I think, about screen stuff, and I asked them, at what age do you foresee giving your kids cell phones? Because I didn't have, my kids, cell phones came on board when my kids were teenagers, so I didn't really have to deal with the little kid. And like little kids already know how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And the consensus was like around age 11 or 12 is when most of them were planning. And I was like, wow. And just all the things going through my head of what they're having to deal with that decision and making that decision, and the flack that they have to go through with their kids about that decision and enforcing it and everything around it. It's just, it's scary.
It's scary, Debbie, because you have, unless you want to micromanage your kids, you can track them. No. I've never tracked my kids, and I think 2 out of 3 I've been fine with. 1 out of 3, if I had tracked, but we probably would have been in the same situation. But tracking or limiting apps and shutting this off, it's like this is so anti who I am as a human being. Like, I think of the professional work I do. I teach people how not to control other people. I teach people to let go with boundaries, so everyone else can kind of rise. And that's how I parent. That's how my wife parents. And so I just struggle. The phone thing, for example, none of our kids got phones until I think 12. And the boys maybe a little bit later, because they weren't quite the norm. They might have been 13. I'm not exactly sure. My daughter 12. But once you say yes to that, unless you're willing to micromanage everything, which I don't agree with,
right?
That child is now has an open window to anything, any kind of information they want, if they happen to stumble upon something accidentally, and the innocence goes away like that. The innocence, like, or you can't unknow things and you can't unsee things. And I remember having this conversation with one of my sons a few years ago, and he had told me something. I said, you can't unknow that. Unfortunately, you'll never unsee that. And now the question is you're going to continuously gravitate toward that, because you can completely numb yourself to something that's wrong, and that's like my biggest worry, is where our young people are becoming, numb to things that are clearly not right, but they're so normal. Right. That I think that's contributing to a lot of our problems. I'm being very generic here. I don't know if you know what I'm saying.
Generic and I'm thinking about all the negatives, but there's also antidotes to that. And the number one antidote to all of this is getting out in nature with your kids. So that's it. I mean, that's the simple truth is walking, hiking, beaches, like anywhere you go in nature, you're countering the effects of all of those screens. So that's my
so talk about that. I totally agree with that. Let me go into how do you in 2022 put that out there? It's like, this the answer. It's literally that easy.
It's literally that easy.
How do you draw people in who are saying, oh please. So I go for where they don't dismiss the simplicity as naivety, if I'm even pronouncing that right. Because I agree with you. It's those simple things, like sitting out in the backyard and listening to the birds. I feel like I'm 100 years old sometimes, between calls. Not now because it's 0 out, but in the spring and the summer and the fall, in between my calls, I'll go sit on the patio. I'll just watch the squirrels run around, or the birds in the tree, like the hawk chase the robin. And it's like, it's so therapeutic. And I just think it's things like that get missed. Like, we're missing those little moments.
Right. But you can root it in science to help parents. Like, for example, their eyesight is not developing correctly because they're here. Their eyesight develops early on because we're looking out at the woods. We're out walking and seeing distances. And that sort of thing. I mean, it's so simple. You think about humans are foragers and wanderers, and you go out and you move your body. You're not meant to sit, what was that movie where the guy's sitting there like on his toilet watching the TV, like this Idiocracy, that movie.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's come to pass. Like, we're living it now.
But I feel like we're going in that direction. I feel like I'm feeling like a dinosaur overnight when it comes to this stuff, because the world is becoming, somebody sent me a link the other day, and I probably don't understand exactly what I watched, but this whole metaverse thing, I'm just at a point where I need to be on a different planet right now. I should be somewhere like 6,000 miles away alone, because I watched this video, and it's this I'm probably going to explain it wrong, kind of this ability to buy virtual property and develop it, and you spend money to develop this virtual world. You might invest X amount of dollars, $1 million, to build your own virtual hotels on a virtual beach, and then I pay you to go stay at your virtual hotel. And I'm like, I don't understand it at all. Or we could virtually date a fictitious character. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, is this really where the world's going, where we're losing that, whatever, go back to nature or sit and have a conversation with another person? And where I feel like sometimes the most obvious advice sounds archaic, and it shouldn't. It's like, why does going out to the yard or walking through the woods or sitting with somebody and having a conversation, why does that all of it, to me, and I'm not saying it is for everybody, but to me, like, I almost feel like I'm saying, well, you should really be nice to people. Like, oh, of course you should be nice to people, but it's almost being
Tell the
overlooked.
truth. What happened to tell the truth?
Just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. You know what? So what? You made a mistake. Well, you know what? And that's, just to bring it back to what you said, you had to ultimately admit, I'm in a bad situation that I didn't plan, and I have to just say it, and I have to risk being judged. And I feel like we're losing that as people. Like, 99 out of 100 conversations that I have professionally are with people that I got to get them to just kind of say, hey, really, this is what's really going on. Okay, let's deal with that. And once that's dealt with, now you can do anything. Now you can deal with anything. But it's getting them to that point where they can just isolate, this is what's really going on. And I know I don't want to say it, and I'm embarrassed by it, or I'm whatever, I'm ashamed of it, but I got to say it. And I wonder, like, how often is that really at the root of everything you do?
Well, I think always. And one of my talents or gifts or whatever you call it is I'm very compassionate and I'm very non-judgmental. And so when parents are in front of me and I'm working with them, I don't see all the things that they do wrong or whatever. I mean, I see that as something that I can help them with, but what I see inside is the person who loves their children and the person who loved their parents, but their parents may have done something that confused their thinking. And, I mean, I just see the deeper thing in people. And so people just feel safe around me. And, I'm one of those people that people are always stopping and talking to, and they're either domestic violence victims and just randomly start talking to me, or they've got problems with their kids and they just start talking to me, and it's just, it's always going on. But I have that's my gift. It's like to have the right words at the right time for people. That's me. And so if the potential is there, and that's, people invariably fire, I've been on the web, my website's positiveparenting.com. I got that in 1995. Like, you don't get URLs like that anymore.
Right.
And people would find me from all over the world, and they always attributed it to some spiritual experience. Most of the time it's God. It's like, I was praying for, like, needing help with my kids, and there was your website, or, like stuff like that. And I don't know how much that comes into play, but it's when somebody is seeking, they will find answers. And, I tend to be one of those answers if people are seeking help with their kids.
Do you ever feel like you're working? And I don't mean that, I'm asking that
Never. Never. If I had 10, I used to say $1 million, but now it would need to be like 2 or 10 or something. Yeah. I would still be doing this. And and my work is funner when I have enough money that I'm not worried about money.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen, but it's happened. And now the pandemic has been super good for me. And I hate saying that, but
Yeah.
able to shift, because all my work used to be traveling and going, speaking and that kind of thing. And now everything is on. Nobody even wants me to come in person yet. And which I miss that a lot, and I hope we get back to that someday. But it's opened up all this Zoom. People will actually pay. Nobody would have paid me to teach on Zoom before. Schools, they would have never done that. And now they are. And so that's been really helpful to me, to be able to do my work in a bigger way.
Yeah. Well, you strike me as a very real person. What you're teaching is who you are and what you've lived. It's not curriculum. I'm sure you have curriculum.
Yeah. No, my prayer was, this was right after the shelters, and I was working at a law firm as a receptionist just to try to, pull myself out. And my prayer was, God, give me work that I love, that makes a difference in the world, and lets me be home after school for my kids.
Yeah.
And this unfolded. So it's absolutely my life's work. Yes.
Where are you based, Debbie? I should probably know that.
No, it's okay. I was born and raised in Ventura County. So I was in Ventura when all this was going on. You're in California too, right?
No, I know my accent is California. No,
Oh.
I'm in Massachusetts. I'm joking.
You're Massachusetts. Okay, yeah. I thought you were on the West Coast.
No,
so no. I was Southern California, and then 3 years ago I moved to upstate New York for it was for work. I actually went to teach classes, and I fell in love with it, and I stayed for a little bit. Then the pandemic brought me here to Louisville, Kentucky, which is where my daughter is. She married a guy from here, and I'm very happy here, amazingly enough. After New York and California, it's a culture shock in a lot of ways, but I love it. It's affordable. Like I said, I'm in an apartment above my grandkids that I love. Their parenting is amazing, and I get to be part of this family. So I wasn't isolated during the pandemic, which is wonderful. And I can travel from here. So it's all good now.
I relate to your pandemic comment. I thought my business was just going to go away when it happened, and not only has it grown, the work it feels more connected. Instead of coaching somebody by phone, for example, we do this, and even the Zoom trainings I just feel like I'm sitting in the room. It's interactive, so it never feels like somebody's in Florida. It just feels like they're right here in my office. But I don't think you can get there unless you speak from truth. If you're because I hear a lot of criticism about the Zoom and the online trainings and coachings that are mechanical, and you're stuck to a slide, for example, which I know, maybe we all need a little bit of that, but if they don't feel a human coming back at them, it's not as effective. But like to me, I relate to what you said. What haven't I asked you? I could keep going. I have 30 questions here. I didn't ask, but I enjoyed the way this flowed. What haven't I asked you? And is there a way in which you want people to reach out to you? I'll let you kind of like wrap this up and communicate what I didn't allow you to communicate yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's not anything specific. For me, I want children to be seen and heard and understood. Like, that is my mission in life, is that children are not abused, that they feel seen and heard and understood. And I don't work with kids at all. I mean, I work with the parents, because that's the way to make that happen. Yeah. Like, if your parenting is improved in any way, your kids will benefit from that. And so anything that you do that can improve your communication with your kids, do it. Like, to me, that's the most, like, I feel like this was my magnum opus, raising my kids, doing the best that I could. Like, I'm done with life. Like, now everything's just skating, like, that was super important, to like raise responsible human beings. Yeah. And you don't want to feel regrets about that. Yeah. Now, did I regret things I did? Yes. Do my kids tease me about stuff? Yes. And they all come to me for parenting. Like, how do I do this? Help me. What do I do? And so I know, like, that's all good, right? That I'm on the right track with it. And, but I always kept trying, like, doing my best. And I don't want to feel like I gave up on this, or, and that's what I tell parents too, especially parents of teenagers. Like, it's never too late. It is never too late to make that relationship better and improve it. And it's good for them too. It's necessary. So this relationship it's so important. Like, it is so important. You brought these kids into this world. They dreamed you, they chose you. Are you going to step up to that? Or are you going to refuse whatever the gifts are they have to give you? And to me, it's just that perfect design between parents and children is so precious. And I just want to help people make that everything they want it to be.
No, that's really good. Really good. What about how do people reach you? How do you want them to reach you?
Positiveparenting.com and Instagram. I'm at Positive Parenting Debbie. And I have a Positive Parenting Pep Talks podcast that I do that's just 5 minutes a day. It's not like this. It's not an interview thing. I'm just teaching 5 minutes a day. Get on and listen in the morning. Get your little positive parenting pep talk.
Where's that, on Apple? On Apple, Google?
All of them. Yeah, Apple and Spotify. And I record it and have it in Anchor, but then it's, put out on all the different whatevers. So there's a link to that on my website at positiveparenting.com. And or you just put in Positive Parenting Pep Talks in the podcast formats, and that'll come up.
I'll include all of that when we post this as well. So Debbie Godfrey, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
You got it.